Okay, hi everybody. Hopefully this is working. I'm trying a new live streaming platform. I'm just going to check real quick in Facebook to see if this is going. And if not, we'll figure it out. Hope you guys are well. We're starting these weekly live streams to provide a little bit more support and a little more direct teaching in the group. And we will be doing more of these in the Sanctuary Within, which is our off Facebook platform, where the Anxiety Breakthrough curriculum lives, where you can get more direct one on one support from me, group coaching, and a lot of additional trainings. But this weekly live stream is just for anybody who wants a little bit of additional support, wants to understand and learn more about the approach that I take with my clients. Uh, so let me just see here if this is working. If it's not working, we will just deal with it. But I'll post replays if you are not able to catch this live. I'm really glad to be of service here. It's really heartwarming for me to be able to help people who have had anxiety or are struggling with anxiety. I've had it myself. I know how debilitating it can be. I also know that your time is valuable, so let's go ahead and dive in here. So, if you were like me, you were probably someone who looked like you had it all together. So maybe you had a good job. You've certainly have good people around you, but underneath, anxiety was running or has been running the show, and that can be quiet or it could be loud. It could be constant or it can kind of flare up at times and make life quite overwhelming. And you might have tried all kinds of different methods out there and all kinds of different approaches, which obviously all these approaches are there for a reason. They are going to help. So I just am sharing the approaches that have helped me the most and what I've combined and distilled down into the anxiety breakthrough curriculum. That's what I teach. So you might have tried therapy, you might have tried mindfulness, self help, even spiritual practices. I'm an ordained minister and have helped people in that capacity. And you might have tried all these things and still find yourself stuck in this loop of overthinking, of pressuring yourself, and ending up burning out. And so I'm hoping that this will offer you a little bit of perspective and some hope that anxiety is not just something that you have to deal with for the rest of your life. So, the approach that I take is obviously the name of our Facebook group originally was the anxious personality. The anxious personality is the name of my book. So, it's worth taking some time to talk about that. And we want to just see what if or ask the question, consider the question, what if the anxious part of you, this part that struggles with nerves and sensitivity and fear, what if this part of you actually isn't you? And that's what we're going to explore today is this distinction between the personality and something that I work quite a bit as a minister and what I work with my clients all the time is the concept of soul and the experience of our spirit and who we actually are. So I want to start with something important because if you're like me, a lot of professionals that I work with, you probably value precision, right? Science, that sort of thing. And I get some feedback sometimes of, okay, is there really such a thing as an anxious personality? And I want you to know that it's not a clinical diagnosis. You're absolutely right. So I get some feedback sometimes from therapists and counselors and psychologists about my book, and they say, oh, there's no such thing as an anxious personality. So, yeah, that's right. So, in psychological terms, the personality refers to stable traits, right? Things like extroversion, conscientiousness. And under that lens, from that perspective, there's really no such thing as an anxious personality. There's just patterns of behavior and coping. So when I'm talking about the anxious personality, when you hear me talking about it, I'm pointing to something deeper. I'm speaking from more of a spiritual lens from the inner world, that the anxious personality is an identity that we have formed to survive. So it is a version of yourself that got really good at scanning for danger. It got really good at managing people's impressions and performing well under pressure. It got really good at anticipating and bracing for rejection, and all of that to feel safe in the world, which is absolutely what we needed. But over time, obviously, this starts to become a limitation. And the deeper truth that I help my clients get into and really understand is that the anxious personality, the anxiety itself that you have identified with for so long, is not actually who you are. So there is a much bigger, much more spacious, much more powerful, much more limitless part of yourself underneath that, and that actually expands beyond that. That is not anxious. It is not a thing. It's not part of its nature. And that is the part that we call the soul. It's the part that is intimately intertwined and inherent in the DNA of our soul, completely intertwined and at one with God, with source, with universe, whatever you want to call it. Um, and this part inherently has peace. It has calm. It's steady. It has awareness. It has a presence that is already whole, already free. And I believe that every healing journey begins when we remember that, when we come back into contact with this spiritual truth, that we are not our adaptations, we are not merely our personality or what we have identified with. We are much more than that. So let's break that down a little bit more. You've probably heard me talk about this quite a bit if you've been following the group, but most high functioning, sensitive professionals that I work with, most of my clients that I work with, they operate from different patterns of the anxious personality, and they all come down to certain kind of traits, certain kind of tendencies. The first one is over identifying with your thoughts, because before you start to become aware of the personality with this ego structure, you tend to identify with your thoughts, especially worst case scenario thinking, right? So just let me know if you can relate to that, right? We live inside of our minds. You might think things like, well, if I'm not always prepared, I'm going to fall behind. If they're disappointed in me, I must have failed. If I relax, I'll lose everything that I've worked for. But the truth is that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness, the consciousness, um, the observer of these thoughts. So when you start to really realize that you are the actual space, the consciousness, a lot of times I say, well, we are the sky of awareness, and all of our thoughts, all of our emotions are is the content of our experience. Those are like the clouds in the sky. So the first thing that we want to do is start to disidentify from our anxious thoughts, which kind of keep us in this cycle of overthinking, over anxious. It just kind of loops around if we have no control over that. So that's what we teach in the curriculum. That's the first thing that we do, is to make sure that we have some control over our minds, some training around that, so that we can start to bring that into a little bit more of a calm, centered, settled kind of space for our minds. As we start to become more aware of the thoughts that are happening in our minds, we come into another pattern, which is the big sort of number two of these tendencies, which is letting the inner critic run the show. So likely, if you haven't done any of this work, you probably don't even realize how much your inner critic is in charge. So this is the voice that says, that wasn't good enough. You should have done more. You better get it right this time. And typically, it's not trying to be cruel, but it actually is in its nature, right? It's trying to protect you from failure, shame, rejection, and it will actually start to use any means necessary to be able to do that. So when it goes unexamined, it becomes the voice of fear, not wisdom. Okay, so number three, um, sort of characteristic there is that ends up disconnecting us from the soul. It ends up removing us from the present moment, which is where the soul resides. It's where God, where source, where presence, being actually is. And that's where we can actually experience it. We can't experience that in the future. We can't experience that in the past. It has to be right here in the now. And this is the big uh, sort of crux of the work that we're doing here in the anxious personality framework and in the sanctuary. We get very used to living from the neck up because that's where the ego personality typically is. It's constructed of all these rules that make you think and manage and perform, and we forget simply how to be. So we lose contact with what our stillness feels like. We lose contact with our deeper knowing. We don't feel safe resting in ourselves. Um, but the thing that we want to try to remember and always come back to is that the soul, that presence, our beingness is always here. It's quiet, it's available, it's waiting for us. So when I reference the anxious personality, you can think of that like armor that you've put on as a child. All of these anxious tendencies, the perfectionism, the people pleasing, the avoidance, all of that has to a degree kept you safe, but of course, now it's suffocating you. And it's the thing that I hear most from people is that it's affecting our quality of life. We don't get to go out and actually be free to be ourselves. We don't get to experience life in a spacious and carefree kind of way. And certainly it affects the enjoyment of our life, right? The quality of how we can enjoy our experiences. So, obviously, our question is, what can we do about this? And so, if you are familiar with the approach that I take, and we've done some work together, maybe some of you haven't, um, the first thing is that we don't need to fight the anxiety. We don't need to attack the personality. Instead, we can get curious about it. We can start to use that capacity of awareness, use our consciousness, use this ability to observe our inner dynamics, and we start to listen. So, generally, there's these three essential shifts that the anxious personality framework teaches, right? The first one is creating space from anxious thoughts. So, we don't need to do this through force, right? We just simply do this through presence and awareness. So just being aware of an anxious thought, labeling it as a thought, observing it, and seeing it simply as a thought creates a kind of space from it already where we can really just simply be. So we learn how to watch the mind instead of being trapped inside of it. So the very fundamental kind of principle of mindfulness itself. And it's so important because it is the portal or the gateway into the freedom of the soul itself. So the moment that you see your thoughts as thoughts, that ego structure immediately starts to loosen. The identification with anxiety starts to loosen. And the second thing, obviously, is to soften the inner critic, right? So you can't heal if you are constantly attacking yourself. So we have to become aware of this dynamic that goes on all the time within us to meet the inner critic with with curiosity, but also with a kind of strength that we never had. We don't need to fight it so much, but we need to be aware of it and challenge the rules that it has set for us. Because you can think of the inner critic as kind of a misguided protector or a misguided coach that just uses these methods that don't work for us, that make us more overwhelmed, makes us more anxious, and makes us smaller and smaller. When we create space from the inner critic, when we understand it, when we see what kind of impact that it's had on us, then compassion starts to return. This inherent sense of safety and acceptance starts to return. And when that happens, the nervous system starts to settle. You know? So the third thing, obviously, is that when the nervous system starts to settle, this shift that starts to happen is a natural reconnection with the soul. This is the kind of sacred spiritual shift of really coming back into contact with God, with source, with qualities of presence or being that we have lost through our trauma, through our experiences, through how we thought we needed to be. And again, this is not about fixing, it's not about improving. It's simply about remembering who you are. And this is kind of the big distinction between the particular approach that I take and, let's say, law of attraction, affirmation, science of mind, that sort of thing, because we don't necessarily want to bypass all of our trauma or our ego identifications, our defenses, because in those defenses are um, actual parts of who we are, and we don't want to abandon any of those parts. So, in a lot of ways, this is reclaiming those lost parts of ourselves, coming home to our essential being, and really deepening in a real direct knowing that you are enough, that you are inherently peace, that you are inherent safety, you are inherently strong, you are inherent compassion and love and vulnerability. So that's really where the real healing begins when we shift this identity from being anxious and fearful and having a lack of support, not being able to do things in our life, to actually coming into direct contact with the soul qualities that we're talking about. And this concept of direct contact is so important. It's really the difference between trying to do this from the ego perspective, from the ego orientation of trying to get better, trying to fix it, trying to manipulate, versus really feeling the actual peace, the actual substance of God and source and presence in the moment, in real time, not as a concept or some nice idea. That's really where the mystical aspect of this work comes in. All right, so I see a couple of people on. I'm just going to say hi. This is a new platform, by the way, so I have no idea how to use it. So I see Kathy, I see Allison on, Brian, Raquel. All right, great to see you guys. Um, I have no idea if this is broadcasting to Facebook or YouTube, but that was the intention, but we'll figure that out. But nice to have you guys here on Restream and in the sanctuary. So, for those of you who are not part of the sanctuary, DM me. I'm really excited about this. It's a really intimate space to deep dive into this work specifically. So let me know if you have any questions. I don't know, and maybe Kathy, Allison, Brian, Raquel, for those of you who are on, if there is actually a way to chat in here. I have no idea. So you can chat your questions in um, as we go, and of course we're gonna start doing this weekly. This Thursday session is going to live stream out to the Facebook group. It's going to live stream out to, I think, hopefully a YouTube channel and some Instagram stuff. But inside the sanctuary, we're going to be doing much more of this. So I will update the calendar as we go. I'm going to get the schedule together, but we'll go into some deeper teachings. Oh, okay, great. So I see Kathy and Brian saying trying it out, and there's probably a way to chat to everybody, but I'm not sure how to do that. So um, we'll get the logistics figured out. So I was here by saying it's really great to be with you guys, and I will be putting more of these on, and I will also be kind of doing this more in the format of live stream coaching. So next week we'll have some exercises to do. So bring a journal. We'll kind of be doing a little bit more of that here. So again, this is not about fixing yourself. It's about reclaiming what is true, remembering your true nature, and letting the anxious personality relax. So hopefully that speaks to you. Um, DM me if you guys have any questions. For those of you who are part of the sanctuary, this will all be uploaded and you can watch the replays. So if you haven't noticed, I'm a little under the weather. I have some sinus congestion stuff going on. So I'm going to save my voice, but it was really great to see you guys. This is kind of exciting. And I think I've only messaged Allison and I see her live on camera. That's really cool. And Raquel. And so, anyway, it's good to see you guys. I'm so happy to be here with you and to be helping. And we will go deeper and deeper each week. And let me know if you guys have any feedback too, or anything that you guys want to dive into. There's um, a bunch of Q&As that are out there, and I'm going to be doing live streams on all of those. So I'd love to incorporate your questions as well. All right, take care, everybody, and we'll see you next time.